All right, keep your voice low for this one. Welcome back to another explainer. Today we're cracking open a genuinely forbidden dossier. We're stepping away from the bright lights and plunging way, way down into the shadows of ancient, dangerous world building. We're putting together a character profile for dark fantasy fiction, and we are pulling this straight from the Ars Goetia. You know, the legendary catalog of Solomon's 72 demons. Now, before you meet the dukes, the princes, or the presidents of these infernal ranks, the very first figure you run into at the threshold is a king. His name is Bael. But here's the thing. What makes Bael so utterly terrifying isn't some towering, fiery monster form or a booming, world-shaking voice. No, what makes him an absolute masterclass in psychological horror is literally the exact opposite. He is the ultimate archetype of authority that operates entirely unseen. I mean, just listen to this opening description. It's written not as some dry, dusty academic text, but from the raw perspective of a terrified witness. A corridor loses its witness. A mirror forgets a face. A cat watches from the edge of the room. Something ancient breathes like a toad in the dark. Imagine, just for a second, being the person noticing those subtle, chilling changes in your own house. Bael isn't announced by crashing thunder or marching armies. He's announced by his absence, by this sudden, suffocating quiet. The atmospheric hook here is just brilliant, right? Because it defines an entity entirely by what is missing: the light, the reflection, the safety of just being alone. Because you aren't alone. You just can't see who's standing right there with you. Now, looking at Bael's core attributes, we start to see this fascinating historical ambiguity in his lore. Bael, sometimes spelled Baal or Bael, isn't just a random monster of the week. He's this incredibly layered figure shaped by centuries of translation and literary imagination, pulling from much earlier lists by 16th century demonologists like Johann Weyer. Take a look at his rank, king, and look at his legions, 66. Let that sink in. This tells us right away we aren't dealing with a lone prowler in the woods. 66 legions means mass influence, an unseen kingdom. He is the first spirit, literally the threshold guardian to the entire infernal catalogue. If you're building a world, his placement here means he's the very first gate a scholar or a hero has to pass. He sets the rules for this whole dark world, proving that demons have hierarchy, deep political structure, and some seriously heavy psychological weight. And honestly, that brings us to what I think is the most fascinating paradox in his character design. On one hand, you've got this royal dominion. A king organizes territory, maintains alliances, demands absolute authority, right? But on the other side of the coin, you have absolute obscurity. Bael possesses this famed power of invisibility. And we're not talking about a cheap magic trick here. It's a terrifying contradiction. Think about it. How on earth do you rule a vast, highly organized legion when your defining trait is hiding in the shadows? This contrast makes Bael a dark reflection of earthly sovereignty. Its power completely devoid of moral transparency, its obedience without a shred of trust. He desperately wants that massive political dominion, but he violently rejects the accountability of actually being seen holding it. So, how does a guy like that actually look? Well, looking at his traditional visual representation, we see the forms of Bael: the cat, the toad, the man, and sometimes, horribly, a chaotic composite of all three at once. If you're a writer or world builder, I highly recommend you do not view this as a monster with a fixed physical body. Instead, think of Bael as possessing a symbolic body of masks. His appearance is inherently, intentionally unstable. Every witness in your story might report a totally different king, simply because Bael only shows you the mask he needs you to see in that exact, precise moment. Let's break down exactly how these physical shifts represent distinct personality fragments. It's so cool. When Bael wears the mask of the cat, he's pure instinct and silent surveillance. He observes before he acts, moving quietly through the dark, knowing all your secrets because, well, he's always nearby, just watching. Then, when he shifts to the toad, he represents the earth, corruption. He's tied to decay, surviving in the low, swampy places, slowly poisoning the very roots of an institution. And then there's the manlask. This is his mask for intellect, for diplomacy. This is exactly how he enters royal courts, councils, and markets. He speaks with reason and persuasion, wearing this perfectly recognizable, yet entirely fake, human authority. And that composite form? That is pure revelation. It's animal instinct violently fused with human intellect. It's a fragmented identity that would literally shatter the mind of anyone unlucky enough to see him stripped of a single disguise. So the absolutely crucial point to take away here is this. We have to shift our focus from literal invisibility to moral concealment. Bael is the absolute archetype of hidden power. His true danger isn't just that he can sneak up on you in the dark. No, it's that he operates as a supreme authority from entirely behind a veil. He exposes the deep moral danger of hidden agendas. He's that high-ranking official whose money magically cannot be traced. He's the ruler standing quietly in the shadows directly behind the actual ruler on the throne. He survives by testing mortals, testing whether a character seeks knowledge to actually gain wisdom or if they just want to gain control over others without ever getting caught. To really grasp this, let's walk through a hypothetical dark fantasy scene. Just picture a grand, opulent royal court, seemingly operating under the bright, open light of day. But Bael is there, and his unseen presence radically changes the entire atmosphere, turning this busy court into a suffocating, paranoid trap. Imagine an advisor speaking a perfectly logical argument, totally swaying the council's vote. Yet later on, no one can quite remember his face. Policies shift inexplicably in the dark. The mortal king sits there thinking he is the one ruling, but his ear is constantly being poisoned by a shadow, a hoarse, whispered voice that offers him exactly what he wants, with the only condition being that he asks no questions. Bael governs what people do when they think absolutely no one is watching. And honestly, this brilliantly illustrates the core writing principle for this character. We have to consider a profound, disturbing moral question. What does a person become when consequences can no longer see them? That right there is the exact human temptation that Bael exploits. It's the ultimate wish to just escape accountability, to be powerful, influential, and completely unreachable. When you use Bael in a story, his invisibility is at its absolute strongest when you treat it as a moral theme. He tempts your characters with the ultimate get-out-of-jail-free card. He basically whispers, do whatever you want, and I promise you, the world will be entirely blind to your guilt. But hey, every great antagonist needs a weakness, right? So how do you fight a king you literally cannot see? Well, you exploit his biggest narrative weakness, his absolute, paralyzing fear of being accurately named and publicly understood. Imagine a scene where a mortal hero finally corners Bael. The hero doesn't draw a sword. They use exposure. Step 1. They force clarity. They light the torches, they refuse the fog, they completely reject the shadows. Step 2. They demand testimony. They drag Bael's covert, hidden actions right out into the harsh, open air of public judgment. And finally, step 3. Honest naming. The hero looks right through the shifting, terrifying masks of the cat, the toad, and the man, and speaks his true name out loud. Because Bael depends entirely on uncertainty, stripping away that anonymity completely shatters his influence. It's a pretty chilling concept, isn't it? The idea that the most dangerous monsters aren't the ones roaring at the city gates, but the ones whispering quietly in the halls of power, leaving absolutely no footprints behind. As we wrap up this explainer on the first king of the Goetia, I want to leave you with a lingering thought to chew on for your own writing and world building. Take a look at this final question. Who really holds the power in your world when the true king remains unseen? Think about the shadows in your own stories. What actually happens when the crown is worn by a ghost? Well, until next time, keep asking those big questions and definitely keep watching the shadows.